Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm excited to be here today to talk about risk and the fear of failure and what it's like to build a business in an unconventional way, and how all of these unconventional ways that our guest today is building his business can apply whether, you have your own business, whether you have a career, and in all other areas of your life. So I'm excited to really even personally get into this idea, because you have an idea that the fear of failure actually doesn't exist, or we don't have to follow it. So welcome, Dan Zavarotny. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Man Alive, and I'm excited to dive in with you.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah. Okay. So the fear of failure, I think one of the things you said to me was that the fear of failure doesn't actually exist, or doesn't have to exist?
Doesn't have to exist.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll give you a little background about who I am so people
can
have some context of why I say these things. So I was born in Ukraine, moved to the US, and I grew up here and really just try to follow this belief of the American dream of how do you succeed.
Yeah.
And over time moved up my professional career where I ended up in strategy consulting for healthcare, hospitals, insurance companies, medical device manufacturers.
Yeah.
And my job was basically optimize profitability for these places. Paid really well, got to interact with a lot of C-suite people at some of the most important companies in the world, and really hit this, kind of like magic lottery ticket people talk about when they think of America. People always forget that, there's a lot of regular Americans, but everyone has an American dream. So I hit that dream and I realized, all right, cool, now I feel accomplished.
And this is pretty young, right? Because you're still young. How old are you now?
Yeah, but I'm 35 now. This is maybe a 28, 20. Well, at this point, I was 28, 29, just traveling the world. My job, to give you context, was go to 20, 25 countries a year and have dinners with CEOs and just convince them to sign up for contracts with us to improve the organization. So interesting stuff. But I didn't feel the passion. I wasn't that excited about it. It was almost felt like luxury in some way. There's always some of these careers like investment banking, management consulting is considered like the sexy kind of career sometimes. And this is what everyone's like, oh, that's really hard to get into. And I got into it. And my parents like, wow, your life is like creme de la creme in some ways.
Yeah.
And I just didn't care that much. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start my own company instead. Right. My parents are like, what is wrong with you? You just got this level. We moved to America for a better life. You worked your ass off. And then you finally got there. And then you're like, all right, cool. Let's try something else. And the way I started was I was in Silicon Valley healthcare conference, and I ran into one of my friends, Alex, and he was wearing a continuous glucose monitor. This is a device you wear when you want to care about your glucose. Type 1 diabetics use this a lot to track their glucose to give themselves insulin when necessary.
Yeah.
So I asked him, what are you doing? You're not diabetic. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Why? What's wrong with you? Why are you doing that?
And he said, do you know anything about it? And I told him, yes, I'm kind of an expert in this field, both professionally as well as my sister's type 1 diabetics. I've been around these devices. I've seen progression technology for over a decade. And they used to be like $10,000, $2,000, $1,000, and now they're like around $250 a month. So they're getting cheaper and cheaper. And they're only getting cheaper. And I said, okay, like, this is really silly. He's like, well, why don't you try it for a day or two and see what happens? So I want to put one of these devices on, and it just clicked for me. Like, this is the next stage of evolution in healthcare
Why?
around
Why did it?
understanding.
What clicked for you?
What clicked is, right now, if we like right now, 1 in 3 Americans are pre-diabetic, right? 50% are overweight. And so this is diseases that didn't exist 100 years ago.
Hmm.
People used to starve because of lack of nutrition, lack of food.
Yeah.
Now we're dying because we eat too much food, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic. And so the problem is what people use right now is they're either counting calories or they're stepping on a scale. But a lot of that doesn't have the quick feedback loop. With
Got it.
continuous glucose monitoring, you put in your arm, you eat something, and within minutes, this is good or bad for you,
Interesting. Because you either
right?
have a spike or a drop or a,
Exactly. You have
yeah.
an increase or a decrease. And
Hmm.
what's interesting is not only you see it in real time, so you have the mind-body connection, it also helps you believe it,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Because you see, and the third one is it actually provides like evidence of you specifically, because we see this all the time. You go to a doctor and they tell you, hey, you're overweight, or you have bad cholesterol numbers, bad glucose numbers. You ask them what to do, and they say, eat better and exercise.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean? And that's ironic because like a lot of times those doctors are actually overweight.
Yeah.
And so you realize this kind of thing is nutrition is very personalized.
Hmm.
So we've seen a lot of times, like coffee is a good example, where three people drink coffee, one person has a negative response to coffee, and you see glucose spikes. So someone has a positive, improves their glucose,
Hmm.
and somebody has no impact at all. And so you can now see what's good and bad for you. And we see the same thing with
Uh-huh.
like anywhere from sexes. Sexes matter a lot. Menstrual cycle matters a lot. The same food
Uh-huh.
for women, different parts of menstrual cycle matter a lot.
Yep.
And I know it's a men's show, so I don't know how much they care,
Yeah.
but they suddenly say
Well, if
menopause
a
matter
man
a
is
lot.
in a relationship with a woman, he will care because that has
Yeah.
an impact.
Your ethnicity matters a lot. We see, I mean, this is why people, in certain areas like the Irish eat a lot of potatoes. They're not eating as much rice, right?
Yeah.
Like, your microbiome matters a lot. If you have any other disease, if you smoke, if you even something
Wow.
people need to think
Okay.
about this, but like
Yeah.
pollution matters a lot, even
So,
New York
okay.
City.
So, great. Okay. So, right. So, you basically started to see, okay, here's something that could revolutionize healthcare.
Hmm.
I'm here. I have, been working in this job. It feels like a luxury. However, I'm bored. I'm not fulfilled. I want to start my own company. And let's just go to also like the risk factor and that
Sure.
fear of failure. And, what did you face
Yeah.
as you realized, okay, I want to do this?
So it's about talking, it's taking a step back, and I basically said, okay, what's the worst that happens, right? And the worst that happens, I realized, and that's the part where I was afraid, like, oh my God, if I'm not going to get salary, the worst I realized was I just go back to a job,
Mm-hmm.
and a pretty good one at that, right? And I'm
So
assuming
for
most people
you, there
listening are,
wasn't much room to fall.
yeah, I mean, the fall was I'm not making a salary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm hiring employees, I'm not only am I not saving any money, I'm actually spending and paying people for my own savings account.
Yeah.
So the room is there, but the opportunity cost is to not doing it, not trying is much worse,
Yeah.
right? And so, I mean, I always tell people, like, look at the bottom, right? And like, I'm in Brazil right now, and I see when I say poor people, people who are literally, they're actually hungry, and
Yeah.
they actually make something like some of these people make like $5 a month,
Yeah.
$10 a month,
Yeah.
and you realize like American, if we, unless again, taking a step back, I'm assuming that you don't have some mental issues where maybe some people have some drug addiction, things like that, where they can't, control their life as well. But
Yeah.
if you're a healthy individual and you know how to fill out paperwork, food stamps is there, Medicare is there, Medicaid's there. US is actually a very good place to be poor, and people don't realize that.
Interesting. I
A
mean,
lot
I
of
do,
times,
I know as men get older and have families, and there's definitely more risk when you have kids you're taking care of or a partner you're taking care of. And so that does come into play there. How do you, because I know with your employees,
yep,
right, you work with them and you encourage them to actually fail and take risks. What would you say to someone who has kids?
sure. I think you have to set a time frame of what you can accomplish by that certain frame. So, for example, if you want to start something, you have a limitation, you should write the limitation as like, hey, I have enough savings for 12 months, 18 months.
Got it.
And then you have that. And if you hit a certain benchmark,
Mm-hmm.
then it's okay. If you don't, then you go back to your job or
Mm-hmm.
a job.
Okay.
And I think that's the
So
part
you've there
people
and there's working toward that point by saving and, envisioning
exactly.
what you're stepping into and creating also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, for example, when, by putting yourself in situations where it's, the whole psychology of like fight or flight,
Mm-hmm.
it really helps you make better decisions. if you look at what we do a lot of times at work, we do a lot of what I call just like makeup work that we invent just to do. So it looks like we did stuff and done stuff.
Yeah.
And so I knew that if I started doing this like on a side part-time, it wouldn't work. So I had to quit my job. So I quit my job, and all of a sudden I know that every activity I
had to
have
be
to do
on the line, all on the line.
it had to be on the line. It really pushes you to, right? And what's interesting, when my co-founder started, and he said, okay, there's only two jobs, build and sell. Which one you want to do? And I said, oh, I'll build. He's like, all right, you know how to write code, software code? I'm like, no. He's like, all right, then you want to sell?
You're selling.
Like, and you're selling. And I said, okay, cool. How do I sell? And he said to me, I have no idea. I've never sold in my life. So I was like, okay,
wow,
what's my budget?
Really started that way.
Yeah. I'm like, what's my budget? He's like, 0. And I said, shit, man, maybe I should have like thought about this before I quit this high paying job. And he's like, well, we didn't actually sign a legal contract yet to even divide the company. I'm like, well, because my first time doing it, I was like, you know what? I got to figure this out. And from like just, okay, I'm going to figure this out to getting revenue, it was 2.5 weeks, 2 weeks. And I got to about like $7,000 in revenue. Yeah.
How?
Just went on Google and typed in how to sell it on the internet. And 100 strategies came out. I just download all of them, put them in an Excel file. Next one said, and I went through and I was like, how much money does it cost to get this? And from 100, it went to like 5 or 6 options. I was like, all right. So I had 5 or 6 options to go from. Let's go do these. Right. And the first one was influencer marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just reached out to hundreds of influencers, and most ignored me, and like 3 responded to me.
Wow.
And then I worked those 3, and I went through. I'm like, okay, what did I say and why did I work with those 3? Let me redo the script to try it again, and it became 5 and 10. And now we work with a couple hundred a month.
Wow.
Right. And so it's all about refining it, and then hiring someone who's better than me, putting out a spot, and go to the next area. And so the way I looked at it is every one of these failures, because I mean, remember these hundreds of rejections.
Yeah.
When we put things in proportion to something and put a number to it, it feels less like a rejection. Yeah. So an example of this is, so give you context, we've raised now $32 million in venture capital, $10 million in debt.
Yeah.
Right. And we've talked to probably 190, 185 venture investors who said no to us. And this isn't like, hey, how's it going? Can I have some money? This is, we're talking to you 5, 6 times, 2 to 3 hours each call, right?
Long, so a lot of investment there.
And then they're asking every single question. And what happens every time someone says no to you, I'm not interested, or like this isn't going to work, it hurts. There's like a dagger to your heart because you invested so much emotion to this and you think it's your baby.
Yeah.
And people always ask, like, how does that not kill your spirit?
Yeah.
And the irony is, it was killing our spirits. It's continuous rejection. So what we did is we said, hey, let's look at the metrics. What does it take the average person who's successful to raise venture capital money?
Okay.
And we realized it was between 170 to 200. That was kind of the average. So you need between
asks or like.
Yeah. So you have to get 170, exactly. 170, 200 asks of no's before you get one yes.
Wow.
Right. So now all of a sudden, and again, there's exceptions where someone's famous, they get like, if the Uber founder, he wanted to start a company, the first person he asked gave him $1 billion, right? Yeah. There's always exceptions. People get lucky. There's always exceptions. Someone asked 500 people and they also, but we basically said, if we're able to look at these numbers and every person we talk to, we just add as a no check, more like a checkbox.
Yep.
And we know that until we get to between 170, 200, we remove ourselves emotionally because we put that bar of numbers. We don't feel the pain, right?
That's brilliant, right? That you created a context within it, you normalized it, and there was it didn't mean anything. It didn't, it wasn't a mark on your value or your worth. It's like you really,
it helped.
It
changed psychology. And it's the same thing I was saying, when you quit your job, you say, let's say you have family, you have to say, hey, I have 12 months and 60,000 hours I could spend before. If this doesn't work, I move on.
Yeah.
By having a numerical number, and it creates logic that removes the emotion.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what we do in almost every single thing, right? Dating, the same thing. It's no different dating as anywhere else, right? Like everyone has a type, everyone's a flavor, everyone has a taste. And so how do you put a number to it and objective to it where it doesn't feel like rejection? Right.
Interesting.
That by itself removes a lot of the negative feelings and energy. And you're able to focus more on just outcome.
Do you apply that to dating for yourself?
Sure. All the time. Yeah. I mean, you think about it, like you can have 2 people, they look the same, but they have different taste. And that's the part we forget. We forget that like everyone has different preference. We have different preference, but you forget other people have preference.
Yeah.
So someone might love you, someone might hate you, right? Some people like tall people, some like short people, some like funny people. And
So it
so
doesn't have
dating,
to be, again, oh, now there's something wrong with me. It's, oh, somebody else's preference.
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
that's literally what it is, right? And then the idea is that if you meet enough people, sooner or later, you're going to fit someone's preference,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, granted, if you're a famous celebrity, probably you're more of a popular preference, right?
Right. And you have,
But
again, you could be in that range where you ask 1 to 5 people and then,
yeah,
you are in a relationship. But for many, it's going to be a lot more.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? And so by using that, you always want to remove the emotional part of this,
Uh-huh.
right? And it really helps people understand that.
Amazing. So
Um,
I know you said you do this with your employees. What are some of the things that you actually have them do to not, that work around that risk of fear of
yeah, so
failing?
that's the irony about to succeed, you have to be unafraid to fail, right?
Mhm.
And so we specifically do two things. We force people to actually, like, for example, someone presents, and I know it's going to fail.
Yeah.
I actually force them to do it anyways, right? Number one. And so,
So okay,
number one,
someone comes to you and says, I want to do this, or I think this will work, and you know it's going to fail. You
I
have them
make
do
them
it
do it
anyway.
anyways.
Yeah.
I make them do it anyways. But then I have them explain to me why it failed. How do they think about it? So they have some learning around it.
Hmm.
Because unfortunately, like, people always think like, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to take an online course, and I'm going to know perfectly how to do it. There's something you can't replace experience. You just cannot replace experience.
Yeah.
So by forcing this failure constantly, we encourage it. And so we actually, as a company, run experiments in every department. And we always talk about like, hey, we're going to run 10 experiments in marketing. And we will state, obviously, again, we expect 90% of them to go down a toilet and do no value whatsoever.
Well,
But then 10% will work, and that 10% will overcome the other 90 and drive more revenue, more awareness, more of everything. And so
amazing.
you see this, it's a lot of successful companies, they just reiterate. And reiteration is definition of failing. You have to fail.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we have to fail fast, really, really, really fast. And
Hmm.
so for example, as we're building our company, we actually had a similar, belief where we talked about, like you said, kids with a husband who's with kids, maybe,
Yeah.
what he doesn't have the same opportunities I do because I'm single. But it's, again, still, I'm paying people salary in my pocket, right? I liked flying first class, right? And eating nice restaurants. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I have no money. Um, and so me, a co-founder, also said every 6 months we're like, we need to hit this benchmark or we're done. We need to
Wow.
hit this benchmark or we're done.
And then you
And so,
actually did? Because
and we
I've done
surpassed it
that
every time, actually.
sometimes, and then I've
We've
just
sur
kind of faded and been like,
we've
okay, keep
surpassed
going.
it.
Yeah.
Well, we
Amazing.
surpassed it every time, but it's specifically because we put ourselves in a situation where, again, I limited other things where it wasn't a side gig, it was the only thing I'm doing.
Right.
And then really quickly put you in a category of like, hey, is this actually going to drive that? Because the
Hmm.
benchmark always this. It was like, are you driving revenue? Are you improving product? Are you driving revenue, improving product? And it was only those two things that mattered for the first year. And
Wow.
after we said, okay, now let's add a third category: drive revenue, maintain revenue, improve product.
Improved
So we added
product.
those three categories.
Uh-huh.
Then next year became that first five revenue, meaning have more than one channel because you don't want to be stuck in one channel.
Yeah.
And we only added those things. And like, people made jokes that we got to 170 people and we hired our first HR person. People are like, how did you not have an HR person? We're like, you know, like, HR is nice. And apparently companies start getting HR people like 30, 40 people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Our accountant joined like 95 people, 100. I was just doing like accounting myself.
Wow.
And people are like, what do you mean? How's this working? I'm like, well, if we have more money coming to the bank than leaving the bank, I think we're succeeding, right? Whether it's like completely correct or not, no one's stealing. So,
Yes, though I would say risky, right? I mean, you run the risk of there are people who build and then grow too fast and fall apart, but it seems like you did not do that.
well, so this is, but we specifically wanted to go really fast because
Uh-huh.
we realized we have a time frame of, hey, every hour I'm doing this, I'm not doing something else,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my co-founder, if you look at his background, he started three companies, exited all of them, they sold, right, all technology. So he could have, been hanging out at Google making like $2 million a year just hanging out.
Yeah.
So ours is basically like, we need to make the time quick as possible
Uh-huh.
because there's other opportunities we could do, and we want to make sure
Right.
this works fast.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then like, why are we doing this? So
Yeah.
our belief is like, we took it to the extreme. It's successful failure, right? We're like, either gonna be really big or zero. We
Yeah.
don't want a middle-sized business.
Yeah. Got it. Amazing.
And
And
it
you said
really
in
pushes you on
three
the gas.
years,
Yeah.
what did you say? You had $100 million valuation of
Yeah.
the
So we
company?
did 100 million valuation in 3 years and 170 employees from just idea, let's go, to 3 years later.
Wow, that is fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's ironic because I look at some other people, I'm always like, man, I feel like we need to go faster. I feel like we're always behind.
Oh my
But
God.
it's always, you're always comparing who you compare yourself to.
Of
And
course. Of course.
there's always the Airbnbs of the world, the Facebooks of the world. TikTok, you see TikTok, they went from like, idea to even more, much faster. But
Yeah.
I think being ambitious is critical here, but also the irony here is you have to be ambitious, but also not afraid of failure. And a lot of times those things are a little bit contradictory in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
ambitious people are afraid of risk. So I always tell people you have to be self-aware of the stress that's going to happen.
Yeah.
What I mean by this is, let's say, whether you want to start something, let's make it simple. We're talking about dating. You want to talk to someone at a grocery store or a bar that you're interested in, right? And people are afraid because they're like, what if I get rejected? What if this happens? If you assume, like, again, the worst that happens, person says no, like that's literally the worst thing. And you actually emotionally think through that stress in your head. If you go through that experience and it happens, it doesn't hurt because you've already almost experienced before
Right.
that
You've
action
already
happened.
pre-experienced it,
Exactly. So we
pre-digested it.
we do this all the time. People always talk about positive visualization, waiting for it to happen, imagining it happening. Here, I always think about like almost like negative visualization. Worse than happened. Okay, cool. And now anything that happens is crazy. Anything that happens, you almost have this positive energy about yourself.
Right. It's like,
Whenever I
oh,
talk,
bonus.
it's like people always tell me when I talk to me, they're always like, "Why do you seem so excited?" Like sometimes I get like a neutral answer for something, and
Yeah.
I'm like super excited about it. And they're like, "Why is this guy excited?" We literally gave him a neutral answer, like we're not even sure yet.
Right.
And it's because like I expected like, no, 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 get the hell out of my face. I hate
Right.
you. So I'm like, they're like, maybe. I'm like, okay, I can work with maybe. I'm
Okay,
super
great.
excited. And so,
Interesting.
and the worst case, again, and I'm adding the second part, I'm like, what's the learning here? Like if I got them to
Yeah.
maybe, what else I do? What's the next approach?
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's just mindset. It's all mindset. It's crazy how much the mindset can change things.
Yeah. It is really crazy how much the mindset can change things and how I'm just hearing multiple different ways that you are navigating our habitual tendencies of mind to limit us and cut us off and knock us down, and that when you work around that, there's ultimate potential.
Yeah. I mean, I make this joke sometimes where, when we're younger and we're kids, we're always like talk about things we want to accomplish in life, things we want to live. And I've, kind of told my parents what I want to do, my friends, and they all said, yeah, sounds good. Like that's never going to happen. And almost every single thing in my life has gotten farther and better than I even said I was going to do.
Wow.
Right. And it's just crazy. And a lot of it is just like in some ways you have to be a little bit outrageous.
Hmm.
Right. But then the second part, I think that part's fine, but I think people forget you have to be also obsessive about whatever it is you want to do.
Interesting.
Right. I think people do a lot of times these vision boards, but they don't actually pursue. They're like, I want a Lamborghini, but they don't do it. Or I want to go live in Italy, but they don't do it. And they don't get obsessed. Like, for example, if I pick a topic like say Facebook marketing, anything it is,
Yeah.
I will dive in and I'll
You
spend two
it
months
sounds like
obsessing
you
it,
will get
right?
all the way in.
And the way I look people, because of people forget that like to learn, like you can learn 90% skill in like 6 months of anything. To
Mm.
go from 90 to 99 percentile, that takes 2, 3 decades.
Wow.
But to get to 90 percentile, you can get just about good at anything, right?
In six
And it's
months, you're saying?
in 6 months, like really, I think any topic.
Wow.
And it's specifically because most people will do things haphazardly. Like most people look at their jobs as just something they go to.
Yeah.
They don't get obsessed, right? And I think I always tell people there's really a three-way method to this, and I hope people take this seriously because I think it's helps people to learn that skill they're afraid of having, and then they could go start a company. But it's go do that thing expecting failure. So Facebook ads, for example, is something I've never even heard of this until we started. So step one is I basically just said, okay, I'm going to spend $500
Hmm.
expecting zero return. I'm
Yes.
just going to press every button. When I say every button, I'm literally going to click on every button
Yeah.
and see what happens, what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take by hand notes on everything that happened, why it's confusing, what made sense. Like, I did X, what happened, Y.
Yeah.
If it didn't happen the way I expected, why? Ask that question.
Yeah.
And then I just called the customer support Facebook like 1,000 times. They were annoyed by me. But I knew every button in and out. The next part is actually just obsessively like actually doing the courses, listen to the podcast, listen to other experts, so you get a little bit more higher level strategic thinking about it
Hmm.
and best practices. And the third one also is critical is actually going and find experts who 1 to 2 years ahead of you,
Yeah.
just asking them questions.
Yeah.
Um, and you'd be incredibly amazed how many people will just answer. People you've never met before, you can message on LinkedIn like, hey, I have a question about this.
And
And
they'll
people who
answer.
they'll answer. What's nuts is I think the part people forget is like, oh, I've reached out to mentors, I've asked them questions, and again, they're afraid and they're like, they've rejected me. I don't want more rejection. And
Yeah.
the answer for that is you reach out and say, hey, can you teach me about marketing? Can you teach me about Facebook? Versus mine is, I might listen to someone on your podcast and I like what they have to say, but I want more information on certain fact. I'll
Uh-huh.
message them like, I
Uh-huh.
listened to you on this podcast and I heard this
I heard
specific
this
fact.
thing, and here's the
And
specific
then,
question I have.
and people love to answer that.
Yeah.
Right. And my response rate is like 60%.
Wow.
And I'm not joking with you. This is like reaching out to multi-billionaires and they
Yeah.
respond like 60% of the time.
Wow.
Right. Because people, we as human beings, we love measuring things. This is the reason like we love money so much. It's easier to measure. Like I have this much money, you have this much, I'm winning if they're like in life. I'm not saying this is the great way to measure life, but
Yeah.
this is the reason we love people like money. It's easier to measure properties, whatever it is. And so when people answer a question and then you come back next week and you got a little better and you ask another question, and you see that progression of your growth, they actually
Right.
get a little dopamine rush.
Yeah.
I love helping people too, but they reach out and asking questions and I give them feedback and I see the improvement. It's addictive for me to want to help more as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Can you share a little bit about some of your own failures too? Because I imagine that some people listening might be like, dude, this guy had, what do they call it? Like the golden whatever, or like, you're
Yeah.
somehow blessed and
Yeah.
it just works for you. And clearly, so I don't want to downplay, because clearly you put in a lot of energy and you go all in, and you don't fuck around.
Yeah.
But I think it could be helpful also for some of the men here to hear, okay, where did things go wrong, or where did things, turn south for you, that then they can actually feel your humanity too.
I mean, there's just so many things, right? So like an example of, when I was applying to be a strategy consultant, I interviewed at a location. Then the most popular tactic that I remember, HR calls you after they want to get a job offer and ask you, what salary do you say you want? Right.
Oh.
And but after I already finished the interview process, after like we're like ready to give you an offer, what salary do you want?
Wow.
And I tell them, what can you do? And they're like, what do you want? And I name his salary, so I'm ready to negotiate. And they go, sorry, it's too high. We'll have to decline your offer. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what do you mean? And I had to go to New York to do these interviews, or like 7 interviews, case studies, like 15-hour interviews. And this is before I realized that HR has a metric and recruiting has a metric of offers given versus offers accepted. If you give out offers and like a percentage of them are declined,
yeah,
this is where recruiter and HR are considered low performers themselves. So their KPI is offers accepted, right? So if you ask, so you have to, if you give them a number and it's something they know they can't match, or they know they're not going to negotiate on, they're going to straight up reject you right away. Even though I was trying to, throw high numbers so they can, so we can start negotiation.
You can negotiate. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot. But I mean, that rejection, I was like, wow, okay. And after like I'm vested, I want this job. It's me just, again, Friday night, going by thinking about it for the weekend, like what the hell just happened? Like shock, because I've never seen this where like we're getting offered for you, and I have an email saying we're getting making an offer, and then turn me down because I just said a number.
Yeah.
And it's calling back on Monday and say, hey, what about a different office? Can I retry again? And they're like, that's unusual. I'm like, let me just give you another chance. And just flying in Chicago for the same company and redoing all those interviews for another 15 hours with a different group of people to the New York or Chicago office, and getting the same thing, right? Except now I just say, okay, what can you guys do? Let's start with your numbers first, and like push them hard on like, give me the offer first before
you have
I'm
to give
giving
me
you
the
any
offer
numbers.
first before
Yeah. And it's the same. So like, I mean, those kind of things, like events that rejection happens, I think about it, turn around and try again. Right. It's just, I mean, specifically, we just talked about these rejections of investors. We had something like 182, 183 no's before one yes.
God. And you said, right, multiple meetings, multiple
You know what I'm saying?
hours.
This is like, I mean, and I remember this is where investors are taught. It's interesting. They're taught to never tell you the true reason, because they tell you the true reason, you start saying why, and then they don't want to explain. What if you disagree and you might be a root? So they say, sorry, we have to pass market conditions. Sorry, we got to pass different thesis. But I mean, this is 183 no's. And the irony, I mean, these are people who went to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford. These are like all super successful people. So you're talking to nonstop smart people, and they're just saying no to you and rejecting you all day, every day.
Yeah.
But what I've realized is, and this is where one of the things I did early in my career, but I didn't really realize it. It's kind of happening haphazardly. And I used to think, shit, my life sucks. I'll give you an example. But now I actually pursue, and something bad happens. So the example I'm specifically talking about is, summer, me and my boss went to Japan for consulting, right? We get there. She's been working on this project for 4 or 5 years. It was my first day in a project, and we just arrived in Japan. We go to the office, and she goes, hey, I actually quit now. I'll see you later.
What?
And I'm like, wait, what? We just got to Japan. And she's like, have fun with the project. Good luck. She just wanted a free trip to Japan, right? So we, I walk into the office and I don't know what's going on with the clients, right? I don't
Yeah.
need consulting level. I just started. And it turns out nobody speaks English. They all speak Japanese.
Oh my God.
And this fear and just stress sets in. And that, my brain goes very terrible words in my mind about my boss, about this company, about what's happening.
Yeah.
And I just excuse myself. I go home, I go for a workout. Or when I go home, I go hotel, I go for a workout, and I just take a shower and I go to sleep. It's like 11 a.m., but I'm like, I gotta take a nap. I need my body to redigest this information and just
Yeah.
think about it. Wake up and then start writing down like, what are the biggest obstacles? Okay, I don't speak the language. I don't understand this company, XYZ. And then just one by one. Okay, how do I, if it's an easy enough task, let's do it. If it's too hard, let's break it down smaller tasks. And first one I went is just Googled Japanese English translators and want to hire
Mm.
a translator with me. The next one is understand. I don't know anything about this company. Okay, let me reach out to partners back in the US and ask them what they know, what information they have from their folders.
Yeah.
And just one step at a time, breaking the problem down and then going and getting the problem done and then solve an issue
Wow.
and then build a relationship. And then it was fine
It
in the
really
end.
does feel like you take the emotion out and you just logically, piece by piece break it down. You even said, okay, if it feels like too big of a task, what are the smaller tasks that I need to accomplish here?
Well, I think that key part, it's the same thing. It's knowing it's you're gonna be in a state of emotion, freaking out. Your heart is pumping, your pressure's up, your pupils are dilating, you're sweating. And it's the point of saying, hey, this stress is normal. There's nothing wrong with it. I accept it. Let me
Mm-hmm.
just let some time pass for this
Yeah.
to go away.
Yeah.
Because if I act right now, I'm going to be irrational.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where a famous phrase always goes like, sleep on it,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Just sleep
and
on it, see what
there's
happens.
permissioning yourself because I talk about that with men in dating too, where I'm like, okay, if you're sitting at a table and nobody's saying anything, right? You don't have to get freaked out that it's silent and awkward and weird. You could just say something like, oh, like, I want to ask you a question, but I'm not sure what it is yet, right? Like you get to create that time for yourself. Somehow it sounds like you did that with that company. Like, all right,
Yeah.
I'm going to go and I'm going to be back at this point when I have all of this information.
Yeah.
And you've done it in some really high stakes situations.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. I think as long as you're reminding yourself that, it really helps with it. And it's interesting. People, and I've actually started encouraging people in my company this where whenever we have a problem, that's a true problem,
Yeah.
I flip the script of like, this has never happened. I want to learn this.
Mm,
So someone comes in like, we're about to get sued for XYZ.
yeah.
And I go, shit, I've never been sued before. This is cool. Let me go figure this out. Right. And at first people are like, what is wrong with you? And now a lot of people in our company start believing that someone new comes up that people are like fighting to take the chance because they're realizing, I explained to them, like, you do realize by getting exposure to these events,
Yeah.
you basically supercharge your career
Yep.
because sooner or later every company's gonna get sued. Sooner or later someone's gonna do some silly, like things are gonna happen. But
Yeah.
the exposure to those opportunities are not gonna come till 20, 30 years later, a big company. Here you get exposure now.
Yeah.
So people now fight to deal with the more shit in a company, which is ironic, but it does help you because, you know, if it's like sounds silly, but if you like, let's say you defended like a lawsuit 20 times, but 20 times, you're like, it's routine for
I
you. The
got
first
this.
time around, you're just
Yeah.
guessing.
Yeah.
And so getting that exposure early on is what you want in your career. And that's why I always tell people like run toward ambiguity,
Mm,
run toward problem solving. And people start doing it. And the irony is the outcome of our company succeeded dramatically. People are saying they're getting more satisfaction because even
that's
though they're stressed in the
amazing.
moment, afterwards to getting like, woo, that felt nice. I accomplished a big task versus
Yeah.
I'm doing the same thing routinely again over and over.
Yep. Awesome. This is so good. This is exciting. Okay. Any last tips or any last suggestions when you think about a man who's, maybe on the edge and wants to take some risk or wants to do something new, but is stalling or stuck?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? I think it's always just like one step at a time. I always
Mm.
tell people, if you want to talk to, let's say, I know your podcast is about, sometimes meeting women. So if you want to talk to a woman, just say, hi, what's your name? Those days, like, what do you say? Hi, what's your name?
Right.
Like literally it,
No magic secret.
right?
No,
No magic.
just do
And
it.
it's just one step. I always say one
Yeah.
step forward. And with companies, just one step
And
forward.
what you've said this whole time too is taking the learnings, right? You are a voracious learner. So if it doesn't work out, you have gone through and really looked at, okay, what happened here? Where did this go wrong? Why did I not have the outcome that I wanted? And so continuing to learn as opposed to feel defeat or, to doubt yourself or shame yourself about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, rejection happens all the time. And I think the mindset of like, this was not a match, whatever it is,
Yeah.
whether it's your partner, whether it's your business, whether it's relationship,
Yeah.
is a way you look at it's not you, it's something else.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times that's what it is.
Yeah.
It really is that.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today and
Thanks for having me.
for helping expand. I can feel even for myself the sense of like, all right, I can go out and do bigger things than I
You can.
originally thought I could.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome. And where can people find more of you and your company?
Sure. You could check out Nutrisense.io. We actually finally got Nutrisense.com. It took us a while. The Nutrisense.io was like $8 a year. Nutrisense.com was like $50,000. We're like, gonna go for the $8 one version. But then, a couple of years later, we got the Nutrisense.com as well. So finally own that one.
Awesome.
But check it out. There's a ton of health stuff, guys. I think it's critical. There's a ton of free information. That's amazing. I think the goal for us is to really have people be healthy. Because whether it's in your career, your work life, your personal relationships, being healthy is just critical. And it's very attractive as well.
Yeah.
To everyone. And so check it out. And also you can, if you have any questions about anything in life, happy to help out. Add me at LinkedIn and ask a specific question, not just a broad one. Or like, tell me about life.
Great.
Dan Zvorotny. I'm always helping answer people's questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.